So I'd like to take you all back to a rather strange encounter that happened during my childhood. Now, I'd been a Boy Scout for a while, eventually leading to my career as a park ranger. Now, it's a career that I loved, and in fact I still love. A lot of people think that I'm going to have lots of weird stories that happen while working in the forests, and I do to a degree, but nothing that I think can't really be explained. There was some weird sightings. I mean, the strangest thing was probably what was potentially a UFO, or maybe a government aircraft or something, but other than that, it was nothing that the mind couldn't take a pondering of and actually solve. I did have something stranger that happened when I was much younger. Now, I had a group of friends, and we all lived in the same area. It was really nice where we lived. I mean, this was back in the day, quite a while ago now, where that you would often have to meet up with your friends and you didn't have cell phones or anything like that. So if ever you wanted to go outside, you had to organise it really well. That wasn't too much of an issue though. Luckily for us, we lived really close to a big forest and some big parks. Basically lots and lots of greenery, so that was really nice. Ah yes, I have so many fond memories of the beautiful summer days being out there with all my friends, just having a ball of a time. It was really beautiful, and to be honest, I wish I could go back there. Since a lot of us have gone different routes, and to be honest, my friends just got into drinking. I don't know why. My friends especially become really hooked on the idea of going to one specific bar, and that was it. It was quite literally all that they would do too, so I actually found it incredibly boring. I mean, gosh, there's so much more out there in the world and so much more life to live, but for them, it was, yeah, let's just get stuck here and let's not do anything else. And I found that quite boring. I actually found that for me, myself, and with my other friend, we would actually go to other places which were much more further afield. It was a lot more interesting because of that. But when we'd want to meet up anyway, luckily we'd be very close to the big park that led to the forest, so sometimes we'd play baseball and things like that in the fields, but we'd always get bored and go further on. Now, I remember one very strange day. So we were going through the woods at night. We were basically way beyond the time that we're supposed to go to bed, and it was pretty warm out because this is during the summer, so we felt safe out there. One of my friends said, "Hey, do you see some people coming there?" And we kind of panicked a bit thinking it was cops because you're really not meant to be in here at night, and they police it incredibly well to make sure that nobody else actually comes here. So we all ducked down and kind of panicked a bit. That's when we realised something was different about these people. These people were carrying something. It seems quite heavy. One of them has like a torch. It's not actually a normal torch like a flashlight. This is actually somewhat fire-based. I don't know what it is, but it kind of looked like one of those medieval ones. I think this is bizarre. And then what's really strange is that another appears, then another, and another. I mean, literally, there was probably about 20 of them. It was really harrowing, especially being so young and not knowing the area that well. They seemed to be going across a bridge into a much deeper part of the woods. And again, this is just scary to us. We don't know who they are or why they're out here. We stayed down for a while, but eventually decided to bolt and run. One of my friends lets out a scream, and I was fixated on them, and I realised that all of them, all 20 or so, stopped dead in their tracks and seemed to face towards us. Yeah, now I was scared. We all start running out there screaming for our lives. We eventually get back to safety, and I guess just things go on like normal, so we're not really thinking too much of the whole ordeal at this point. I just think, yeah, I'm really happy I've got actually into safety and not had to suffer whatever it is, but it shook us up a lot. A lot of us didn't want to go back to that place, but eventually we decided that we would. So we basically go on like normal and just enjoy our childhood there. There was an island which we'd known about, which we couldn't really make it to most days. Sometimes in the summer, you could kind of make your way there without getting too wet, but we'd have a really good time there. I remembered one really funny thing that happened is that we decided to tie up one of our friends there onto a tree. Yeah, that's the kind of fun that we used to have when we were young. So we're doing that, and we all head back to go home. And that's when we realise that we forgot about Billy. Billy was tied up to the tree on the island. He probably presumed that we were coming back because he didn't make any sounds or fuss or anything, so we're kind of like, oh, whatever, he'll be fine. But we know we have to go back and get him. When we get there, he says, that's really weird. I say, what? He said, well, I thought you guys come for me much earlier. I kept quiet to try and scare you. It was like you'd forgot where you tied me up. We all looked at each other confused and said, no, we didn't. We went and forgot. After getting the initial frustration out of his system, he suddenly looks a lot more scared. I say, Billy, what's wrong? And he kind of shakes his head and doesn't move too much. I say, what happened, buddy? He then says, I thought there was a group of you coming to rescue me and you were just searching everywhere. It's like you knew I was here but you couldn't find me. He then goes very quiet and we all do. Now at this point he's still tied up, so we release him quickly. And none of us really said anything on the way back. I mean, we thought that he was probably just trying to annoy us for not actually coming and get him sooner. But he was incredibly quiet. In fact, he didn't come out with us again after that, and we all thought that was kind of sad and strange. We all just thought that maybe he was a weird kid or something, and didn't really think too much of it. But we gave that island a name. It was Dead Man's Island. There was something weird about it. I mean, yeah, we're just kids, but it was definitely odd. So we go on again, and things are pretty much normal. School would start up, and I eventually got kicked out and had to move to another one for fighting and stuff. I was a little bit reckless back in the day. But eventually, life goes on and everything's normal. But I was still able to meet up with my friends because I got a bike. I was so grateful for that because it gave me so much freedom, and we're actually riding through the forest as a few other friends also have bikes now. There was actually an issue where these things would get stolen, so we basically made it a habit to tie them up to trees and stuff, actually with the same rope that we had found and used to trap Billy that time. So this happens and we go to play a few games and eventually ended up playing baseball again. There was a small clearing which we really liked and we'd all basically play it there together and just would have a good time generally. So we head back and we realise that our rope is gone. What's really bizarre is that all of our bikes are there. And someone says, come on Billy, as a joke, because he wasn't there but kind of joked that he'd actually done it himself, but no one was there. We think this is weird because why didn't they take the bikes? We think maybe we just missed them and they were about to, and we agree not to take our bikes here again. Now it's probably a mistake because it was a really good way for you to cover ground quickly if you needed to, but honestly we never really encountered another soul out here, so that was definitely a strange thing. But life goes on, but it did get a little bit more weird however. There were reports in my community. It was quite a small and close-knit one, so word would spread around quickly. This is before the time that you had Facebook groups and things like that, but every so often there would be sightings of people doing strange things out here in the woods. Now, because it was like that game where somebody says a word, then it changes and changes and changes again, so you never knew what to believe. But there were reports of people out here acting really weird. I mean, animals going missing, blood trails that would lead to basically nowhere, and other really weird things like that. So that was definitely odd. Every so often, my cousin too would swear that he could hear terrifying screaming coming from deep in these woods, and guess what? Absolutely nobody around to have made it. Yeah, it was really, really weird. I well and truly didn't like it. And it all seemed to be coming from Dead Man's Island. So what we decided to do was to go and explore it one day, just to figure out what was going on. We were young and naive, so we were convinced that ghosts were out here. Now, every time that we come to the island, something would feel odd. I couldn't quite explain it. It just felt like there was a presence there, like you weren't alone. And that made us more and more convinced of this place actually being haunted. Now, that was further rectified when we realised that there was a cross there. It was obviously makeshift, but it was covered in like tar or God knows what. It was truly filthy and truly disgusting. It just looked really weird. I just didn't like it whatsoever. It was creepy. In fact, thinking back on it, it probably should have never been there in the first place. Now, over the following months, we come back here again. Nothing ever really happened until one day I spotted something. It was a cross, but it had been burned. Somebody had clearly set fire to it, but it was actually tied up into a tree, and there was a small silver pendant on it. It was obviously melted from the fire, but I thought that was odd. This isn't like the kind of things that people around here would do, especially not without explanation or reason for it. I really didn't like it. It kind of made me feel quite sick actually. But again, I was young, so I thought, oh, whatever. I didn't even tell my friends about this one. So we keep on playing, and we decided that there's something we can do. Something nobody's thought of before. So my friend comes over saying, guys, get this. Why don't we camp out here? Nobody's going to know we're here. We can stay out late and we can see the ghosts. My friend actually had an army tent too, which would have been big enough for all of us to stay in. That was kind of cool. We think, why not? But how are we going to do it? Our parents would absolutely never let us go out here, especially not alone and at night, so that was odd. Now, eventually we come up with a plan. One of my friend's parents were going for the weekend, and he basically said, we can pretend to stay over here, then we can find out what's happened here. We can camp on the island and there's going to be no one to say that we can or can't do it. Yes, that was it. The plan was set. The night was decided that we're going to camp here. Now, at the time, none of us thought to bring weapons or anything. So the day comes and we have the tent ready and a few sandwiches as our supplies. So we start going closer to the water and we suddenly realise that we're not going to be able to get across there without getting absolutely everything wet. So we decide the best thing we can do is have a search around for a while and just look to see if there's somewhere that we can set up camp, just to wait out all of this madness and weirdness. So that's what we do. It took quite a lot of searching, but eventually we get there. A really good ridge where we have such a good view of this place, and we set up camp. We actually concealed it incredibly well. I honestly think the army would have actually been proud of how we did this. I mean, even when we went off to do other things, we'd really struggled to find it and we'd have to call out to each other. And eventually it starts to get dark. And that's when we notice the first weird thing. There's a light somewhere in the distance. It looks like a campfire or something, but we can't tell exactly what it is. Now this was there for quite a while and doesn't seem to go out. We were watching it, and every so often it would go dark for a second, then would appear to be light again, almost as if somebody walked straight out over it, which is the first signs that we're not alone out here. However, we decided that this is probably just, people camping out in the woods. Maybe they were homeless, I don't know. We decided to stay quiet, which was definitely a good idea, and it slowly becomes nightfall. Now, after a while the fire eventually goes out, and we can hear something. It's a hacking sound. It sounded like somebody was trying to chop a tree down, very periodically whacking at something, sounding like it was maybe with an axe. And eventually, there was a crushing sound, but it didn't sound like a tree had fallen. Oh no, this actually sounded like a pumpkin or something had just been smashed open, which again was really weird. But what can we do? Nothing, so we just have to wait it out now. Now, after not too long, there's more silence again, and that's when my friend notices it. There's movement coming up ahead, and it's from the island. We now realise that there's something moving in the water. Being stupid, I thought maybe it was an alligator or something, because that's what it sounded like, just a slosh slosh. Then eventually, we could see a few people sitting on a boat moving with something. Someone was rowing very carefully, obviously trying not to make much sound. We were convinced that whatever this thing is a ghost, and we've found it, alright. Wow. I just couldn't believe the day had finally come. And then, we hear dragging, and something is getting dragged onto the island, then held up. There's about 4 of them. This happens for a while, and we can hear kind of like a chopping sound, but as though it's not being made with an axe like earlier. Instead, this one's being made with something much smaller. But again, I just cannot figure out what the sound is, or who could have been making it. So I sat there basically dumbfounded trying to figure out what this is, when I see it. There's something dressed in all white, which I can only possibly put down as a ghost, stands there and raises its hands up, and it stays there for about 10 minutes not moving. I was so scared, and so was everybody else as we're watching this. And then it turns and goes on to the other side of the island out of sight. Now that's really weird. None of us have ever seen anything like this before, and we know that we've seen something paranormal, and that we should probably be careful here. None of us are able to make a move. We're literally just stuck there for what feels like an absolute eternity. Now, after not too long of waiting here, we realise something. None of us seem brave enough to actually move and investigate what's happened. We decide that we're going to have to wait until the following day to figure it out, which again isn't like us because we're all very brave. Not one of us got an ounce of sleep that night, and we packed up things, and none of us felt confident enough to actually go and investigate what had happened. So what do? Not much. We ended up just going back, and everything's like normal, and we continue on with our lives. Until eventually, something sparked our interest, and we decided to go back again. The spark was here, and it became a flame, and we head over to the island. Luckily, we're able to wade through the water without it being too deep, and there's a disgusting smell. It really smelled tremendously bad. It smelled like somebody set off 1,000 stink bombs or something in my nose. It was like that. And there's lots of flies and things around. We searched the island, but we can't find why it smells so bad. So again, we just decide to leave. I mean, even as inquisitive kids, the smell was so bad that we really know we can't wait here. So instead, we decide to turn back, and everything starts to go back to normal, it feels like. Until then, my mom tells me that we're not allowed to go out at night any longer. I keep asking why, what's wrong, but she doesn't tell me. However, I know my dad's coming back home in a few hours, and my dad doesn't care so much. He's going to tell me what's up. So I wait, and eventually my dad's car pulls up, and I think to myself, yes, finally, let's figure out what happened, as I feel overwhelmed with excited emotions. I want to know what's going on. Why is everyone acting so weird and secretive? I watch the headlights as my dad comes in, and then he comes in, and also looks a little bit concerned almost. I say, Dad, what happened? Dad. But he looks at my mom and doesn't say anything. I realise that he'll probably tell me once she's gone to bed, so I wait. I wait and wait for what felt like probably an hour, but was realistically 30 minutes or something. And my dad finally relents and says, Son, don't go out there at night again. I say, why is that, Dad? And the words that he said to me, I can still remember like they happened yesterday. They found a body on there. He didn't need to say anything else to me. I really felt worried by what I'd seen and what I'd heard. Immediately, I was put straight back to that previous situation, with all my emotions running through my veins so powerfully. I knew that if I sold what had happened, I would never be allowed out again. They didn't even know we'd camped there, let alone I hadn't gone to the sleepover, so I said nothing. Even to this day, it kind of still haunts me. Now my ex-boyfriend and I did a rainforest walk which drops down to the bottom of the forest. There's no other cars in the car park, and we didn't come across any other hikers, so we basically got it all to ourselves and had a great time for the most of it. As we were walking up, my ex was ahead of me and suddenly stops, raising his hand, signaling me to stop with him. So I look up and there was a woman staring straight ahead of us. She looks normal, but I have a chill when I see her. She had dark brown hair, which I only noticed because it really strongly contrasts against her cardigan. Now, it was bleach white and goes down to her feet, totally clean like off the rack. I thought about how ridiculous it was for her to wear it while hiking, so we stood there totally motionlessly, just staring at her for what was probably 30 to 40 seconds, but what felt like a lifetime. We didn't immediately feel threatened, but there was no way I was going to take a step towards her. Instead, I felt this weird kind of stillness, as though the forest and time around us frozen. She finally turned around and started to walk slowly up the trail. We watched her and waited, not saying a word to each other until she was well out of sight and we began walking. The car park was still around half an hour away and we walked in silence, but both of us are on edge, trying to listen for any suspicious sounds. Didn't see her or anybody else on the rest of the trail, and there's still no cars or anything when we returned. So my friend and I went to a holiday party about a year back, and we had an early morning meeting for a volunteer event the following day. It was around 12 to 1 a.m. when we decided to leave the party, but my friend realized that she forgot to buy drinks for the meeting in the morning. Not wanting her to have to wake up early in the morning, I offered to drive her to a nearby grocery store that happened to be open late. On the way there, we realized that it was super quiet and that there wasn't any other cars around, which is pretty typical if it wouldn't have been on a weekday. Now it was a Saturday, and usually Saturdays are busy until 3 a.m. in our city. Nonetheless, we drove on and reached the store. As we drove in, we saw a lady literally appear seemingly out of nowhere, dancing around in a very free-looking way. I don't really know how to describe her outfit other than almost pirate-like. There were pieces of clothing hanging off of her outfit and her face was pale white with dark but neat eye makeup, and her hair looked as though it may have been having really big dreadlocks or something, but with feathers or whatnot tied in. We quickly pulled into the parking lot, well away from her, and practically sprinted into the store. We look back and she's gone. I'm not sure if this matters, but I figured that I would include the ambience of the store as well, in a cross-dimensional experience almost. The lights were constantly flickering, and when we first walk in, there was some couple who were middle-aged, and I think it was a woman who was pregnant if I remembered correctly, whispering to seemingly the only employee. When they spotted us, they stopped talking and watched us walk down the juice aisle. Needless to say, my friend said that she changed her mind and wanted to leave. When we first stepped out, we both happened to look to our left and saw the woman from earlier still standing at the opposite end of the parking lot. We immediately booked it to the car, get in and lock the doors. But I tried to start it and it won't start. I just bought a car a couple of weeks prior from a dealership, and the car had never had any issues with this, which was weird. Luckily, after a couple of turns of the key, my car started and we left. In my rearview mirror, I see an entity dance towards my car, but it was almost as though that she was sprinting because she was moving so quickly towards us. We eventually get out of there and made it back to the hill towards our homes. It was as though every single car that shouldn't have been on the other side of the hill suddenly appeared and everything's as busy as usual. It was almost like we just drove into another dimension where everything was different and weird. I still have no idea exactly who or what we saw, but I know very well that there was no way that we could have experienced this in the normal world. If anybody has any idea what it could have been, I would really appreciate it. I'd worked in my job for about 10 years and I really enjoyed it. Though eventually I did kind of get tired of seeing the same things. Now some of my friends said, oh, maybe you should get a different job and not work as the park ranger that I had for so long. But I don't know, there was something about it that I just couldn't seem to go away from. I wouldn't say I was necessarily drawn to work in the forest, but it just kind of connected with my soul, and I'd done it for a number of years afterwards. I'd like to share some weird things that happened to me with you guys, because I think it's important that other people know about them. Now the woods are pretty big, and we don't really know too much about what's out there. Now, keeping that in mind, I'm open to the possibility that some of what happened to me was just done by weird people, but at the same time, I'm not really so sure. Now, this particular event happened when I was relatively isolated too. I was basically patrolling somewhere, and I eventually got moved to go and inspect a cabin. The cabin was fine and we knew that. I just needed to stay there for a couple of days just to complete all of my checks. Now, this is something I thoroughly look forward to. It meant I could read and drink my coffee and just bring a few newspapers up there with me and just have a nice time being there on my own. I'm one of those people where it takes a few days of getting away before my mind completely opens and gets off of the tasks and things that are around me. I was having a hard time escaping from some of the stresses of life. I was staying strong and getting on with things, but I was going full speed ahead and not really taking any time for myself to sort things. So I could really do with this break. Some of my other friends at work there said they found the same thing too, but they did report feeling weird when they were out in the cabin. They said that they had the feelings of being watched. I didn't really take much notice of this because obviously, if you're out there in the woods, these feelings can come across very quickly. So it wasn't anything to be surprised about really. I don't know. When you'd worked out there for a number of years, I guess you kind of got used to it all, so I wasn't really fazed. So, I look forward to my journey. I remembered that on my last night before heading out there, things were pretty good, and some of the other guys there were just having a few jokes with me, trying to put me off the whole thing. They said, you know, there's Sasquatches out there. You heard about the bears that can come out of the trees and things like that, just joking. I didn't let it bother me though, and I said my goodbyes and set out. I remembered going home that day. I felt pretty comfortable and happy knowing that there was good things ahead of me. To be honest, my thinking was getting a little bit more negative at the time and I needed to get away. I won't go into too many details about things that was happening, but you could say it wasn't the greatest time of my life around now. I was using work as an escape really, which isn't the best of things, and yeah, everything worked out exactly the way that I wanted to. I'm now married with my wife and have a small boy on the way, and I'm really excited about this. I got another job that I absolutely love, just at the time those things seem far away. When I get home I make sure that I packed up all of my coffee and everything else that I could need for this. I didn't have to bring that many things with me. I had some cookies and other supplies and snacks. You do get the supplies out there, but they're kind of more like military rations or MREs if you call them that. So I wanted to bring some other sugary things to make this more exciting. The cabin actually has a fridge and it's relatively well stocked, but sometimes the fridge will go out, and that's going to be annoying because you're going to have a very hungry few day tenor there, which I was trying to avoid happening to me. I remember driving over from the gas station. I actually took the wrong turn and go back to the normal place that I work, forgetting instinctively that I was supposed to be in the cabin, and I turn around. One of the rangers waves me away and pretended that he was saluting me like I was going on a military mission I wasn't coming back from. I did it back. I didn't really think much of it. As I'm driving, the trees are providing some very nice shade from the intense sunshine. Now it is one of those summers where the sky was beautifully clear and it makes beautiful shaded areas in the forest. It was such a beautiful place to be. I really recommend anybody that hasn't been out there before to try it, because I think it's great. So, I continue on my drive and there's some insects that are getting into my little truck, and this is annoying. One of them I couldn't get out for the life of me. I'm not sure whether it is a mosquito or what, because I was concentrating on the road, but God was it annoying. I actually had my shirt off trying to bat it, but then I realised that I couldn't put my shirt back on again, and it was actually quite funny. Nobody really knows about this. This is the first time I've told people about this specific detail. Now, eventually I managed to get to where I have to park up, and I dismount. I still don't know what insect had actually got into my truck. I just figure out that hopefully, after a couple of days of being locked in there, it will die. Or worse, it will have children, then I've got a new problem. But I'll worry about it later. So I get my box of things and everything, and I start walking down there. Now again, the trees are absolutely wonderful. I feel really at peace and happy. There's almost like every direction that I look in, there's nature all around me. And I couldn't feel more happy. I'm honestly beaming at this point. You can see the high rock formations all around me, and it looks incredible. It honestly looks like it's something out of a film. And I'll take my way across a bridge with a stream that once ran. Closer to the winter months, there'll actually be more water through this, but it's just become so dry that there's nothing there. Sometimes I wonder how the trees stay so strong and lavish, but they do. Now, after probably about 2 hours of hiking and seeing lots of dragonflies and other beautiful insects, I eventually make it to the cabin, and it looks pretty dusty. It looks like it's been coated by a sandstorm or something. It's a bit annoying because it means the other people that were there before didn't actually make any effort or progress to clean it off, and I find that quite annoying. It doesn't take any effort whatsoever for people to be courteous to each other and to make our lives easier, but hey, here I am. Now, I remember the first weird thing I saw is a turtle shell. There are no turtles that should be around here, but why is there a shell here? I thought maybe one of the other workers or hikers had left it here, but I don't know. Seems pretty weird. It was hollowed out too, which was especially strange. No skeleton or anything. So, I put the key in the door, pop my things down and make my way inside. And I met with a beautiful smell of coffee. Not bad coffee, but some unopened ones that people have left around. And other little presents for me to find. This makes me very happy, and I start boiling the kettle. Now there's something wrong with the kettle and it seems to constantly boil, and I go to turn it off. As I turn around, I think I can see something in my peripheral vision, but as I look there I can see nothing. I presume that it was just my eyes adjusting from the bright going into the dark, and I don't think much of it. Though this time I'm a little bit more scared, and I decide to close the door behind me. I met with a feeling of peace, and the cabin's really nice. It's quite basic, but you have like a toilet area, a little kitchen area, and an area to sleep. It's kind of like a studio design if you were imagining a modern apartment, where you've got one area sectioned off and everything else is in the same room. I don't have an issue with this though. I knew there wasn't that much water, so I have to really try and ration it. I don't have a clue when they last filled up the tank, and I don't want to be the person that gets left short of showers and things like that. Especially because of how hot it is out here, it can become really overwhelming very quickly, and I'm trying to avoid this. So I'm really having a great time at first. I decide to make some food and open up one of the MREs. After this, I drink my coffee and I have my cookies and I'm just relaxing. I know that I'm going to need lots of energy because I have lots of different areas to check. It's nothing too much, I just have to make sure that paths can still be travelled on and stuff like that. So I set out and do this. There's a really beautiful cool air as I set out, and it makes me feel quite at home. As I step out, I do realise that I can see something up ahead of me. It's on one of the paths that I have to make sure is clear, and I can see it's a little bit overgrown, but I guess that's kind of normal. Basically, as long as I could get through okay, it would be a pass. If not, I would have to try and clear it out myself or make a note of it so people could come out and clear it. I actually have a shovel with me and I want to attempt to fix some of this myself. Now, as I make my way through, I come up to a large tree that looks like it's covered in moss, but is something slightly different. I'm distracted by this as I see something further. It looks like the silhouette of a person standing there. I don't think too much and think maybe, well, it's probably a hiker out here. I decide not to disturb or scare them. I think maybe if they see my shovel they might think it's a weapon or something from afar and become scared, so I don't make too much sound and just continue. I've decided that I should go around the path away from them so they don't really get spooked, and that's what I do. Now, eventually I have to loop back round and I get to the other area that I need to check out. I go across another little path which takes me over a stream that once flowed. It looks really pretty once more. I then realise that I can still see the silhouette. I do think this is particularly strange because it doesn't seem to have moved. I'm not sure whether somebody's left a jacket there, and I decide to investigate. I follow up some steps, and I keep staring at this thing, but I can't make out exactly what it is. Now, as I'm approaching, I'm feeling completely relaxed. I think it's just the environment and not really taking too many notes of the situation, but I was maybe too cautious, free, and think that I probably should have had a better approach to this as I get closer. I can see something staring at me now. I say something because I can tell it's not a person, but it was pretty weird. It looks like a black sheet with some kind of mask up on it. I can now see that it's a hood. It's not a hoodie, but it's kind of flowing down. And I can see the base of it as a tree. Somebody's left some kind of drape over this tree, and it doesn't look normal. I get closer and closer, and I presume that somebody's left a tent up here. I think it's weird because it's black, and I think, why would you want a black tent? You're honestly going to get scalderingly hot. This is certainly not the kind of tent you want out here. And I then have to start making my way off of the path. I'm a little bit annoyed about this because it starts messing up my uniform, which I really enjoy keeping pristine. I do, however, eventually make it over to the back of it and go to grab it and pull it down, but it's on there pretty tight. I then take a step to the side and I can see a skull. I don't know what kind of animal skull this is, but it kind of looked like the Halloween scream mask that you see every October, but almost like a makeshift home one. This is pretty bizarre. I eventually pull and I'm able to tear this thing down. I go to touch the part of the skull that's on top of the tree stump, but I decide I should probably leave it there. As my hands are probably an inch away from it, I just hesitate. I don't know, it just felt weird. I look this thing in where its eyes would have been for a second and I get the creepies. I realise that I can probably just kick this down though, so I use my force and I'm able to make the tree come down. And I'm quite happy. It was probably about 5 feet up in the air, the stump of this tree. And I'm glad that I don't have to see it anymore. The last thing I want to do is forget it's there, then have an absolutely horrifying moment as I make eye contact with this thing again in the dead of night or something. But that's pretty weird. That shouldn't really be there. I presume that maybe somebody's done it for I don't know, maybe it's been there for a while, but I think this is odd. I take a few looks around and I can't see anybody or anything else. I just remembered that my hands felt very sticky too. It was almost like tree sapling, but somewhat different. It wasn't like this thing was glued up here, but it was certainly odd. I look around in all directions, trying to see if anything else is out here, but I can't see anything now. I don't think there's anybody hiding away too, but I do really think this is especially weird. It's the first time in my career actually that I've ever encountered something weird to this degree. I decide it's probably nothing and say to myself aloud, come on, you're the ranger here, let's get on with it. And I continue about my way. I go up some steps and start clearing another path. I start shoveling, and as I'm doing so, dirt is getting stuck to my hands because of whatever kind of sticky substance is on that robe thing that I pulled down, or that tent. It's actually quite disgusting. I'm usually not that creeped out by things like this, but it really makes me feel weird. I decide that I should probably head back now, and I start doing so. Now I'm not really proud of this, but I actually didn't do some of the surveying and clearing I was supposed to do for the rest of the day. I don't know, it was almost like something clicked in my head and I just couldn't do it. I kind of gone transitioning from being in the moment to being a little bit more cautious of everything, almost thinking more in philosophy about why was this here, what could it have meant. I head back and put the shovel down outside and I go in and start washing my hands. I really struggled to get this stuff off, but I'm eventually able to do so. Then I notice annoyingly that I've used up quite a lot of my water to do this. I decide that I should wrap up my shovel in bandage so that way I don't have to touch it again, and make sure that I wear gloves if I investigate anything similar. So, I actually use the rest of the evening just to listen to music on the radio and try and relax. There was something about hearing that voice in the cabin that really calmed me down. I actually have the door open now because it's so hot, and I just relaxed really. Yeah, I had more of a job to do, but in this moment I was a little frightened really. This goes on for the rest of the evening, and eventually it's time to get some sleep. I close the door, have the bandage on the shovel now, leaving it ajar to the door, and go out. I take one last scan of the perimeter and head back in again. I put my stuff to the side and decide to keep a knife near where I'm sleeping now. It's something I've actually never done before, and I realise why it's a stupid idea when I woke up the following morning and I nearly stabbed myself. Funnily enough, it's not far away from my neck, and I thought, wouldn't that be funny if I ended up getting myself like that? I radio in my findings from the following day, and I actually lied about what had happened and just said everything was normal, and I make myself another cup of coffee. The cup of coffee is kind of like my morning debrief with myself, where I plan out what I need to do for the following day, what I could do differently and what I could do better, and for today, it's to not get freaked out so easily by small things. That's why I say to myself. I do some positive affirmations and I get ready to head out again. Now what's weird about this morning is that there's kind of a mist that's settled. It's not fog, but almost like a morning dew. But I haven't seen it out here before, and it makes the whole place seem a little bit Halloweeny and scary. I go to look for the shovel, and I can't find it. I look exactly where I placed it the following night and I realise that it's nowhere to be found. No issues though, I probably simply misplaced it, I say to myself. I press on now, looking all over for this thing, but I can't seem to locate it. Okay, that's certainly weird. Again, I don't think too much of it and presume that, I was tired. I probably just forgot it somewhere. And I head out. Now I have to go about 40 minutes away from where I am now to do this further maintenance work, and I go into a really beautiful area where the trees are tall and quite skinny. That has its advantages because I have quite a good horizon here, and if there is anything or anyone, I'm gonna be able to see them now. The trees are actually really tall. I think they're probably about 50 or 60 feet or even taller. It's really cool. Don't know how many years I've been here, but I really like it. Now the mist eventually goes and I feel a lot more confident being out here on my own. I have my coffee with me, but where it started to become more summery and hot as the days progressed and the trees aren't as thick here, I'm quite hot and start to overheat a little bit, so I resort to just sipping it slowly. I'm sweating quite a lot now. I don't feel like I need the energy though, I just like the taste of the coffee. So I continue this walk and eventually find a tree that's fallen down onto the path. It's not too big, but I should be able to clear it. I don't have the shovel, but I ended up using a big stick and I'm kind of able to plant it underneath and using the end of it to tether it out of the way. It only moves about a foot at a time, but my god is it loud. It sounds like a whole tree's fell, and it made me jump at first. I don't know how my stick hasn't snapped, but I continue this process when I hear something. There's kind of like the sound of rain, or maybe like lots of cups being thrown at something. That's the only way that I can describe it. Or maybe like someone was shooting ping pong balls off of the trees. It was weird. I thought maybe for a second I set off a chain reaction or something and some other trees were going down elsewhere, but I can't see anything. Everything is impossibly still for the sounds that I'm hearing, and that's especially bizarre. Now, I scour the area for as long as I can. I even go off onto the tree that I've just knocked down to get a better viewpoint, but I can't see anything at all. This happens for about 4 minutes before slowly fading out, similar to how the sounds of rain slowly go off into the distance as the clouds go away. But that was especially weird. I'm very drawn in to where the sound was coming from, and it's further up the path, so I now head up this way. I have my stick with me still because I knew it was strong. I say it was in case there was more trees to clear, but I was a little concerned now. As I'm walking, I see movement now up the hill through the trees again. It's weird, it almost looked like something was kind of floating through the trees. I can't really tell because how far away it was, but it looked like something quite big was kind of moving through them freely. Almost like it wasn't interacting with the trees, but more just the ground on the floor. Almost like it was in another dimension. I walk as quick as I can trying to get closer to whatever this is, but I seem to get further and further away. And that's when I stop. I'm drawn to the ground as I notice something. I think my brain realised something shouldn't have been there, and what do I see? The carcass of a deer. Now, it's not really the carcass, more the bones. But only the bones. It's almost like this was dipped in some kind of acid or something, because there's nothing else around it. I can't see any flesh, I can't see any blood, just a deer carcass somewhat perfectly in the middle of the path. I start searching now, trying to see if there's any other signs of anything or anyone that could have made this, but there's nothing. I look further and further, trying to see if there's anything similar, but again, I don't see anything. Annoyingly, it's my job now to move it out of the path, and I don't want to do this. I ended up prodding it with a stick for a while, probably about 10 times before I'm brave enough to actually just grab it and move it piece by piece off into the trees and the bushes. Now that was really weird. I remembered when I felt it too, it felt kind of chalky almost. Like too dry, like bone dry, but even more so. I don't know how else to describe it. The only thing that was making it wet is my hands that are sweating. I'm not sure if this is from the situation or just because of how hot it is, but I'm suddenly no longer feeling the urge to investigate further. I continue my surveying this time, and I realise that I forgot my stick. I look around and again, that was nowhere in sight, which is weird because I was sure that I left it next to me when moving the bones. Now eventually I come up to another clearing, and all is well now. I feel a lot better in this open space, just knowing what's going on around me. I finished the job for the day too, so that's a good sign that I can head back now and try and get back to some relative safety. So I turn away and start heading back in the direction and the path that I've just walked upon. Now I get back, and I'm at the point where I found the bones, but I can't see them. I think maybe they've sunk down into the ground a little bit, but that's quite weird. I should still be able to see the bones, especially because of how white they are. It should stand out from the background, but they're not there. I just think it's a good thing that it doesn't have to scare anyone else, and I think, well, maybe some kind of animals wanted them for God knows what, and I start to head back. Now the hike back felt probably twice as long, which is another weird observation. Usually I know exactly how long I've been out for, but I check my watch and I have been walking for the same amount of time, and it feels dreadfully long. I'm also quite tired. I go back into my cabin and close the door, and I fell asleep pretty quickly. Actually so quickly that I didn't even eat or shower or anything. I just woke up the following day about an hour before my alarm. So I eat, I get ready and radio in. And I say this time that I did find some animal remains, but nothing out of the ordinary, and that I've cleared it. They say, Mikey, great, good job, keep it up, not long now. I say thanks, and end the call. To be honest, I was relatively frustrated at this point because I've not really had the relaxing time that I'd anticipated, but I've still got a couple more days left, so that can come soon. So I get my things together, get ready, eat some donuts this time, which are actually on the turn. They don't taste that nice, but give me the sugar that I need to head out, and I do some extra work. Now, as I set out this time, I have to survey another area and make sure that there's been no fires here or anything. Apparently this particular area is quite susceptible to having forest fires, and we just have to make sure that there's nothing that could potentially be causing it. It could be trash that people have left behind or illegal dumping. Believe it or not, people will actually dump things out here. How they get this far out, I don't know, but they'll bury things. But the problem is, it makes methane and other gases that are very combustible. And we have fires that are deep out here and quite hard to tackle. So, I'm walking down the path, and in this area the trees are also quite long and thin, but the good thing about it is that it lets you see miles around almost, or at least 500 meters in any direction, so I'm feeling safe now. To be honest, it's quite overgrown again, and a lot of the bushes probably come up to half of my height. It's okay, just makes it a little bit uncomfortable to trek through, but that's fine. Now, I get to the area that I need to survey, and I can't see anything there out of the ordinary. I do notice how the trees have suddenly got much darker now, and it almost looks like nightfall in this particular area. But that's not an issue, it just means that it's going to be a lot more cooler there, and it's going to be a lot nicer for me. So, on my go, much more braver than the last couple of days now, and I feel comfortable. So I'm mostly done now, and I take a few rests. I'm drinking water, and my canteen's actually running a little bit low. Normally this means I should just head back because dehydration is going to be really dangerous out here. But I continue onwards. I see a beautiful bird in this moment that I haven't seen before, and it distracts me from everything. I've never seen this kind before. It almost looks like a green parrot, but it's a little bit different. I notice it's interesting because in all my years of working there I've never seen it before, but that's fine. Now, I take a seat and I look up and notice something odd. It kind of looks like an owl at the top of a tree. It's quite high up, but it's a very weird shape. It almost looks like a dinosaur to me, and I think it's odd. I can also see partly through it, which I think is really bizarre. It's probably about 100 meters away, and really difficult to spot, but I do. I get out my binoculars, and I can't really focus on it that well. I know it's a bird, but it's really difficult to see exactly what kind of bird, and curiosity gets the better of me. When I was younger, I used to love going bird watching and looking out for animals like this, so I decided that I should investigate. The good thing is, it's on the path that I'm on, so I basically just have to follow it in a straight line to get to it, and that's exactly what I do. Now I get closer and closer, until I realise something odd. This is no bird, at least not no living one. Whatever this is, has died up there, and I'm looking at the bones. But again, there's no flesh at this, there's no blood, there's nothing. What only appears to be the skull and a few bones of something up the tree. How it was all held together, I'll never know, but I think this is really weird. I take out the binoculars and look even closer this time, and I soon realise that what I'm looking at looks identical to the remains that I'd found before. Now that's really odd. How on earth any animal or anything could have got up there is beyond me. It almost looks like you'd need a drone or helicopter to take it up there. It's really creepy to see. It wasn't moving though, it almost looked like the head of a totem pole with how perfectly it was stuck there. Wait, wow, am I getting scared now? I almost felt like I was in something's area and land, and it being up there was a sign that I wasn't supposed to be here. I try and mark down the exact location where I am, but I can't be too sure because I'm a little worried now. I decide to just forget about it and continue on the path and do the last parts of my surveying. I did these very quickly this time, and nothing out of the ordinary up here. I take a few seconds before I can actually turn around because I don't want to. I'm expecting to see something standing on the path staring dead at me in my eyes, but I have to be brave and turn back. I don't want to be stuck out here as nightfall comes. I turn around and there's nothing. I breathe out a deep sigh of relief and I start on the path and make my way forward. Now, I look towards where the tree is and it's still up there. It hasn't moved an inch, but I feel like my mind has miles away from the situation. I actually couldn't look at it other than that quick glance. I resorted to jogging past where the tree is. It's probably about 6 feet off of the trail, but I can't be sure again because I didn't take long enough to figure out exactly how close it was. I ended up jogging until I realised I have to stop because my eyes are starting to go a bit weird. Now, I start walking and I get to the other area where I can finish off my job for the day. The good thing about being out here usually is that you can finish the day pretty early most days and do what you want afterwards, but for me in this situation it wasn't a good thing. I'm walking as I notice some leaves fall and I get back to my cabin. Now back to my sanction and safety. It's the most relieved I've ever been to get back there in the time that I've been out. I decide that I need a sheltered day. I get in, I lock the door, close all the windows, and just have a relax. I fell asleep for about 2 or 3 hours and wake up again. I'm very dehydrated. I realise that after I'd been to the toilet and start drinking lots of water. I have a cold shower now to try and wake myself up. I finished writing up the reports of my day and findings. I actually decided to include it this time too. I thought something definitely wasn't adding up here, and it could have been chance that all these animal remains were out here, but I think it's very weird how there was no flesh and blood on any of it. I don't know what kind of animal or creature could be capable of that, but I know it certainly wasn't a hunter, because A, they're not allowed out here, and B, how on earth could they have possibly got it up there without us realising? I don't know, but I guess I don't really want to know. I remembered that I couldn't even focus on reading, which was my attempt at getaways in situations like this. I just stare at pictures of some of the couple of days old newspapers. I'm not really sure what to do. Funnily enough, I actually started doing a crossword and it calmed me down a lot. I think probably all of my brain was being used, probably the parts that aren't normally used from being in dangerous situations, and it made me fly through that thing. Or maybe it was a distraction of it all, and escaping, I don't know. But I eventually drift off asleep. I wake up again and the sunlight hits my face, almost aggressively, and I wake up once more before my alarm clock. Usually this would never happen unless I was stressed out about something or if I had something important the following day. I eventually round my energy up and make my way out of bed and quickly get all of my food in me and showered off, and I get ready for my day. My alarm clock then goes off almost in time with when I get a call from the radio. Now it was just a normal call. They're basically just asking how I'm doing, and I explain what's been going on. They actually take this quite seriously, and they're worried about illegal hunters in the area. But I explain, I don't think this is illegal hunters. I really think this is odd because there's no blood or anything. They also agree that this is a particularly weird detail of my endeavour out here so far, and they say just keep a note on it, and I start to get ready for my last day. I feel happy now and more confident knowing that my time here is now limited. So I head out and start my final day. Things are pretty normal and I almost feel like the air tastes different. Everything feels more peaceful and the usual sounds and surroundings seem to be as they were. Everything seemed a little bit too quiet for the last couple of days, and I honestly forget about what had happened. I make my way up one of my trails and everything's lovely here. The trees are ones that I can see quite far along, and there's parts of them slowly falling down, and lots of plants are in blossom, and everything being in bloom makes it look so much nicer. The first weird thing I did see was a big spider on some parts of wood that I had to investigate and inspect, but it didn't jump on me, which is always a good thing, and it kept its distance, so I was happy. Now, I get towards the end of my day, and I'm feeling good. You know what I mentioned earlier, about wanting to forget about all of the worries and stresses? That comes, and I have a really beautiful peace of mind moment where nothing bothers me. All of the stresses are gone and I feel really happy out here. Now I actually start to feel a little bit sad knowing that my adventure's soon going to be over and I have to return back to the normal parts of my job. The aspect of being out here in the cabin away from everyone and everything doesn't come too often, so I take a few moments to try and appreciate it more. And the sun begins to set and I head in now. I've completed my tenor here and it's time for me to return in the morning. I start packing out all of my things so I can leave quickly and I head off to bed. Now I didn't fall asleep quickly and start doing another crossword. I actually think of trying to develop my own, then realise how boring I am and eventually fall asleep. And I'm awoken. I hear the sound of knocking on the door. I say I'm gonna come, give me one moment, and start to find my things. They persist so, and I say louder, I'm coming, just give me a moment. It seems to go on constantly though, which I think is pretty weird, and it suddenly dawns on me, nobody's coming to relieve me. It's pretty late in the night time, and something's off. I get up, look out the window and can't see anybody. Still in a dazed state, I go outside and look around, and I think I can see somebody, but I'm not too sure. I presume that it's one of the other rangers there, and I say, hey, I'm gonna sleep a bit longer, let me just go to bed. and I go back in and fall asleep quite quickly. Now I'm woken up about 2 or 3 hours later by the same knocking. This time, my conscious brain slips in, and something doesn't add up. I realise nobody should be out here but me, and why would they be waking me up so early in the morning? I realise that was not a ranger who I thought I saw. I get up quickly, and the knocking this time really haunts me. I still have my clothes on from before, so I don't need to get changed at all, and I slowly peer out the window. As I do, I notice a deer standing up on its hind legs staring straight back at me. It doesn't look like a normal deer though. It looks terrifying and menacing, like something I've never seen before. No animal that I've known has ever been able to do this before in my life, so what on earth am I staring at? I then let out a gasp, and this thing runs on all fours. It runs into the forest and kind of takes on almost a human shape, and eventually gets off into the distance. I was stark glued to that window staring for probably over an hour, trying to see if it come back, and daylight now breaks. There's nothing there. It's just me alone in the woods. I think that I might have went into a state of shock after that, and I grab the things that I need, and I start slowly making my way out towards where the back of the cabin is. I have to put something away, and as I'm doing so, I hear my name, Mike. Mikey, come here. Look, I need to show you something. It sounds just like the other ranger who I've been communicating through on the radio with. I say hello, then go to stop myself. This can't be Mikey. I then go back in and I radio in for Mikey, who answers. I say oh nothing and I'm coming back soon, and he says see you in a bit. I think maybe he was talking on the radio and I somehow left it on. I then go back out and start making my way through the forest. But then I hear it again. Help, please help. Mikey, I'm hurt, you've got to help me. That's when I realised something was way off. He wasn't out here in the woods. In fact, it's not physically possible he could have reached me here in this time. I then start to walk very quickly, and the voice, it goes away, but then it returns again, seeming to follow me. But this does not sound like a person though. It sounded like something trying to be a person. There were breaks in its voice, and it just sounded off, where it would go deeper every so often. Mike, come here, please, I beg you. Followed by crying. The crying sounds followed me for probably another 7 minutes, until eventually I get further and further away from them, and I only hear weeping and the odd Mikey, sounding more and more desperate. I know for 100% fact it was not my buddy out there. This was something far worse and menacing. The relief I feel when I see my truck is something I can't describe. I throw everything in the back and slam the door. I don't know why I slammed it so loud. I think it was to let whatever was out there know that I was in safety now. And I start up and I make my way back. I eventually get back and I remembered the entire drive just feeling very weird, almost like I wasn't in my own body. I get into the station and guess what? My buddy's there. He was apparently calling out for me desperately in the woods. I say, hey, were you out there in the woods? And one of the other rangers looks at me weird. I say, I heard your voice in the woods calling out for me, but it wasn't you. I then start saying more of what happened, and one of the rangers who's a bit older looks at me and says, yeah, you encountered a skinwalker. I look at him like he's crazy, but he says, you know, they imitate voices. And for some reason I suddenly remembered the other detail, the weird looking deer thing I'd seen. I explained that I was very delirious and very tired and that I don't think it was anything, but he then explains that apparently this is exactly what they're supposed to look like. I then tell them that I'm never going back there again, and that there were skulls out there that have to be investigated. He then says that he's going to send a few of the boys out there in a couple of weeks to figure it out. I say, weeks? Are you crazy? I say, they're going to be gone by then. He says, no, I'm not risking it, and looks very serious at me again. Now, it turns out that an investigation went out there to find the skulls, and you know what? They could never find a thing. Apparently some of the other rangers, when they're out there, heard other voices of who they thought were other rangers, even being myself, but apparently nobody was out there. Apparently the voices actually went on for the following months before it wasn't heard again for the next 8 years, and eventually I left. Now, I don't want to jump to the conclusion that what I encountered was a skinwalker, but from how they described it and what I saw, I don't know what else it could have possibly been.